podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
You're listening to Achtung Millwall, broadcasting from the beautiful South Birmingham. Accept no substitute.
Hello dear listeners, welcome to another of our retrospective editions, looking back into the past, the Millwall results ahead of tomorrow's fixture at home, crucial fixture at home to Preston North End. The Lions will go into tomorrow's game, obviously a bit of a downer after that thumping, that shellacking, that resounding whacking we took up at Birmingham midweek. As much the size of the defeat, a 4-0 loss, as for the manner of it, a rather pale, limp-wristed shadow of a performance. A bit of a capitulation, in truth, up there at St Andrews. So we go into tomorrow's fixture against Preston, really in need. Some one or two players that took the field on Tuesday night really need to prove a thing or two to the Lions support, I think, tomorrow. So we're going to be playing Preston North End, who are going great guns in the season so far, but we're going to be looking back into the past, back to Edwardian times, as a bit of an amuse-bouche ahead of tomorrow's home game. So I've picked out a fixture from 1903, February the 21st, 1903, an FA Cup game, second round FA Cup game, en route to the semi-finals of the FA Cup for Millwall Athletic that particular season. But this is a home win over Preston North End, not long champions of England, of course, famously first Football League champions in 1888, and I think the season after, unbeaten in that first season, certainly. 1903, a 4-1 win for the Dockers, not yet the Lions of the South, but they were known as the Dockers, in front of 11,000. Match played at the North Greenwich ground, the Millwall Park, the modern day Millwall Park. A 4-1 win in front of 11,000 in the English Cup, as it was known at that point. This report here is from the Morning Leader, 23rd of February, 1903. The English Cup, Spurs and Millwall victorious. Leo rampant, Leo the Lion rampant. So a bit of a crossover in nicknames at that point. Most Lions fans would have called us the Dockers, although we were the Lions of the South also. Preston North End well beaten at Millwall, says the Morning Leader newspaper. This would be the Monday edition. And I love the phraseology of these old time match reports. I'm going to try and put on a voice for it. The superior person of football may turn up his nose and sneer that after all it was not a clever nor a scientific exhibition of the finer points of the game. Or perhaps it wasn't. Millwall never could and probably never will play drawing room football. Drawing room football. I love that expression, dear listener. Their game, our game, is to prevent the other fellows from playing it. Not much new in life, I find, listeners. Whenever you do any historical research, historical show like this, you find circles of history. So even back then, our game was not to play drawing room football. I'm going to use it. I'm going to nick that phrase. Watch out for it on any other podcasts, listeners. I'm going to copyright it. But to prevent the other fellows from playing their drawing room football, that was our style then. Probably has been our style for most of our existence. When it is their day out, the other fellows must look for trouble at Millwall. And unfortunately for Preston North End, Saturday was very much a day for the Dockers. Almost from the start and right from the to the finish, they gaily, Mrs. Shut that door. They gaily overran the one-time invincible team of Preston, who were never allowed any room. So closely did Hulse and co stick with them. And if it wasn't a game crammed with the niceties of football, when is it ever at the Den, dear listener? It was a fine cup tie to watch. The pace was hot, and with the Millwall going as well as and strong at the end as they at the beginning. Mr. George Saunders and Bob Hunter, we've mentioned Bob's name before, dear listeners, huge figure in the club's history, will go on to be our longest serving manager in the post-First World War period. George Saunders at this point was to be a manager, I suppose. The term didn't really exist at that point. But George Saunders was in charge and Bob Hunter was our coach, trainer, bone setter. They may congratulate themselves that 10 days spent preparing for this game at the exotic location of Rochford down near Southend were not spent in vain. It goes on. Let's say from the first place, the crowd was nothing like as large as it should have been, says the Morning Leader. 11,000 were there for it. The correspondent goes to himself. He says, I was hoping for at least 20,000 spectators in the Millwall Park venue. North Greenwich it was known as back then. Now we'd call it Millwall Park. But only half that number turned out, and probably the directors have come to the conclusion that the doubled price of admission and more than double charge for the stands did not bring the anticipated rewards. There's nothing new in this life, this is there. So yeah, raised prices, seemingly, according to the Morning Leader at least, keeping the punters away. It's a matter for the club rulers, and if they are satisfied with the gate returns, it of no concern of the man in the street. Well, that's okay, one way to look at it, I suppose. Speaking for myself, he says, though, I must say I did not like the comparatively empty stands. The huge banks, the terracing at either end of the ground were pictures, for a man stood in one unbroken mass, but the stands, the seats, were places of desolation, which is a disappointment. Disappointment number one, he calls it. Disappointment number two concerns another matter, which is purely the director's concern. It is their wish that J.H. Gettins should play, and while there is nobody who has a greater admiration for our wholehearted amateur than myself, I am bound to say I think a mistake was made in dropping Astley for him. The 5 professionals have been playing well, so there's a mix of professionals and amateur in the team at this point, listeners. Such was the nature of the times. Amateur players would often step into professional clubs. They've been playing well enough for weeks, and also this preparation period spent down at Southend, which would have cost some money. It wouldn't have been a cheap thing to have done, and it was an unusual thing to have done back then, to go away to prepare for a big game. This was seen as a big game, so I suppose the size of the crowd would have been something of the disappointment. It's a long report. I won't read it all, listeners. I'll finish with the last paragraph. The visitors must be but shadows of the former Preston team. They never looked like doing anything else but lose, and apart from McBride, were but second raters all through. They may have been bothered by the wind and the strange ground. Wind and strange ground on the Isle of Dogs, listeners. But with both these disadvantages taken into account, they were but weaklings. On Saturday's form, the majority of the Southern League teams would cheerfully beat them. They seemed surprised at the ginger in Millwall's work. That's an expression. I might nick that expression. They were surprised at the ginger in Millwall's work, and well might they be. There are not yet many people in the North who fancy that Southern League football is small beer. North End can now tell them a different story. On to the third round. Millwall would actually go on to make the semi-final, dear listeners, when they'd finish with a 3-0 loss at Derby County in the semi-final. But this was the second big cup run. We'd made the second semi-finals in 1900. This was the second time would make the FA Cup semi-final. Huge events in the Lions of the South history. Champions, of course, of the Southern League when it was formed in the 1890s. This was a major club. The Lions of the South really were one of the biggest sides in the southern part of England at this point. Your Millwall team, Millwall Athletic team, I should call it this day. Some fine names here. John Sutcliffe was in goal. Andrew Easton, David Storier, Jimmy Riley, Jack Bell, George Morris, a goal for Micky Moran around the 20th minute, as best I can make out from the report. I didn't seem to note the minute time for goals, so around about 20 minutes for Micky Moran. A goal for Joe Gettins, who was mentioned in that piece in the Morning Leader earlier on. One for Ben Hulse and one for Dick Jones. And then finally making up the 11 was Ernie Watkins. Now, this game is mentioned in the Lions of the South book by Jim Murray, and I'm going to read the piece on it. 2 weeks later, after the previous match referred to in the book, 2 weeks later, the Lions disposed of the fallen greats, Preston North End, now the second division, 4-1. With Millwall now attracting many fans from South East London, thanks to a new walkway built under the River Thames, the massacre was witnessed by 11,000 fans, with only McBride, Preston's goalkeeper, saving his side from total embarrassment. He kept the Lions out for 20 minutes before Moran scored, and Gettins and Hulse made it 3-0 by half-time. Jones cracked home a fourth, and in the dying stages, Preston pulled one back, a consolation goal. That emphatic, if not shock, victory put Mill back on the footballing map. The newspaper, the referee, name of a sports newspaper, gave this glowing summary, another one I'll read out. The referee says, Millwall is still a power in this land, and for the time being, a decided factor in connection of the Cup, as any survivors will readily grant if they have to visit the Docks District. Sutcliffe and Co. soon convinced them of that fact. The Millwall ground is not exactly a kind of spirit level. The kind of spirit level would consider a place of ease and quiet. Strange expressions they used. The ridges and furrows do not want pointing out. They tell their tale plainly. A rough little ground, then clearly. A visiting team, no matter its capacity, will never find the Millwall enclosure a happy hunting ground. The more so now, as in all probability, the Dockers have never had a better balanced team than the one which garners the traditions of the old Lions of the South. 2 weeks later, Millwall would face famously First Division Everton on this same rough little ground at North Greenwich and would dispose of them too, dear listener. But we'll come back to that fixture some other time. This one is the Preston match. There's a great picture actually of the Everton game in Jim Murray's book there, Lions of the South. So what's new? Going to Millwall is not an easy thing, dear listeners. Never should it be. The quality of the pitch, I suppose, has improved nowadays. You can't have ruts and furrows on your side, and still, it's a bit of an awkward place in many respects. Nothing is new on that front. Overlooked by the rubbish incinerator to this day. So, what applied then back on the Isle of Dogs, I still think applies now. What do you think, listeners? Are we still shadows of the past? I don't know. I picked out a few names from that starting 11. As I've said many times on these shows, I love the idea that we can just read out names and players from the past. Otherwise, they're lost in the rain. Tears in the rain, aren't they? So I'm going to pick out David Storier. There's a good picture in Neil Fissler's A to Z book, which I always refer to. Get yourself a copy because it's a wonderful piece of work by Neil Fissler, the A to Z of Mill players, and Dave Sullivan, I believe, is the other collaborator on the full list of all Mill players since formation, or as close as you can get to it. David Storier, then, a left back, played for us 1902 to 1904, 57 games and 3 goals for us. David was born in Arbroath in Scotland, 25th of October 1872, and he died in Arbroath in 1910, January 1910. His career took in some wonderful names here. Arbroath Dauntless, that's a good name for a football club. Arbroath, Everton, Glasgow Celtic, Dundee. Came down to Mill Athletic in 1902 and retired in 1904. David, there's a little biography here. David was an experienced Scottish international and an FA Cup finalist with Everton in 1897. He then won back-to-back Scottish Cups with Celtic in 1899 and 1900. He was a burly, solid performer who also played for the Scottish League and joined Millwall after a chance meeting with Bob Hunter, who was holidaying back in his homeland, so he'd gone on holiday to Scotland. During his time on East Ferry Road, the club was Southern Professional Charity Cup champions in 1903, then London League champions a year later. David Storier represented Forfos year at cricket, along with another docker, Billy Stewart, and he saw out his days as a licensed grocer until his death, aged 34. That's young. Life was tough back then, dear listeners, and for working class players, you know, you had to grab what you could when you could. He plays licensed grocer. Didn't know you needed a license to be a grocer. David Storier, 57 games, 3 goals. Goalkeeper in this particular fixture, John Sutcliffe, born in a place called Shibden. I take it that's in Yorkshire. He passed away in Bradford. Born in 1868, passed away in Bradford 1947. Career taking in names like Bolton, Millwall, Manchester United, Plymouth, Southend, Heckman, Wyke, that's a northern name, isn't it? South Kirby, Rochester City in the USA. Vitesse Arnhem as a coach. He used to get around in, surprisingly so. John Sutcliffe was the last of only 3 men to play for England at both rugby union and football, a joint international. I think Neil has mentioned him in some of the previous shows that we've done. He was capped for England against the New Zealand natives in 1889, switching codes when the RFU, the Rugby Football Union, suspended Heckman Wyke for alleged professionalism. Yeah, of course, the big split between rugby league and rugby union historically was over payments. Working class men had to be paid. The rugby union represented the aristocracy who could play as amateurs because they had the money, their listeners. Initially, John played as a centre forward until he converted to a goalkeeper. He helped Bolton reach an FA Cup final in 1894 and won promotion to the First Division in 1900 with Bolton. John won the last of his England caps after joining the Dockers and was a Southern Professional Charity Cup finalist in 1903. He later went into coaching and was a wool comber. Wool comber, combing out wool direct from the sheep, I suppose, to get the bits out of it. While his brother Charles, who was 22 years younger, played for Rotherham County. John Sutcliffe. R.I.P. John Sutcliffe. I picked out two more, actually. Martin Moran, Micky, known as Micky. Martin Patrick Moran, known as Micky. An outside right, played for us 1902 to 1904, 99 games and 17 goals. He was born in the wonderful, famous place of Bannockburn, born in Bannockburn, 1879. He would pass away in America, Rhode Island, passed away, 1944. His career took in a few Scottish clubs, including Glasgow Celtic and Clyde, on to England, Sheffield United, Middlesbrough, Millwall, 1902, then back to Scotland, Heart Midlothian, and Chelsea, and Glasgow Celtic, Hamilton as well. Scottish junior international Micky Moran, who had been an understudy to England international Walter Bennett at Sheffield United and part of the Middlesbrough squad that won promotion to Division 1 in 1902. He was a huge favourite with the North Greenwich faithful, helping the club win the London League in 1904 and the same year the Southern Professional Charity Cup. After playing in Chelsea's first ever Football League game, he was the Division 2 runner-up in 1907, before moving to the USA in 1911, where he was a conductor on the street railway. That's tram system. I think it looks like he went to Rhode Island, or maybe I think Boston has that. Anyway, and then a security guard for the Texas Oil Company and the Industrial Trust Company. What a wonderful career. He'd live the rest of his days out in the USA. He passed away in Rhode Island, 1944. Wonderful. Micky Moran, outside right. R.I.P. Micky. Remembering you, mate. And finally, famous name actually, J.H. Gettins, Joe Gettins, mentioned, of course, in the report from the Morning Leader earlier on as a replacement for Astley. They didn't agree with that choice. He did get a goal in the game, one goal in the 4-1 win. He was a forward, 1894 to 1905, played for Millwall, Gettins. 118 games for us, 69 goals, so a prolific goal scorer. Born in 1874 in Middlesbrough, died in Molesey in Surrey, 1954. His career took in Middlesbrough, Millwall Athletic, Matlock, Tottenham Hotspur, the Borough Road College, Richmond Association, Corinthians, famous name, and Oxford City, not Oxford United, Oxford City, 1904. Joe was one of the many noted amateurs to assist Millwall and is the only player to play in 2 FA Cup semi-final appearances, 1900 and 1903. Played as an amateur. He was an exceptionally talented inside forward, held in the highest regard by his teammates. I take it that explains the choice. The Morning Leader criticised the choice, but I think that's explained there by the high regard in which he seems to have been held. His teammates presented him with a gold-mounted umbrella to celebrate his 24th birthday. Joe represented the London FA and won the FA Amateur Cup with Middlesbrough. He was awarded a Distinguished Service Order during the First World War and later the OBE, while becoming a vice president of the Millwall Supporters Club. A teacher, a professor of education and a university principal, he held education posts in the British Army. Joe Gettins, quite a character there. Corinthians were a famous amateur side as well, so he would play for them later on in his career. Sounds like quite a figure in Millwall history. Now, one thing I love to do on these shows, listeners, obviously that was the football part. I'd just love to look at the front page of the newspaper for the weekend of the game. This was a 4-1 win over Preston, FA Cup second round, a season where we would go on to make the semi-finals of the FA Cup. No mean achievement for the southern sides back then. But on the front page of the Daily Express, there is nothing new in this life, dear listeners. Front page, London, Saturday, February 21st, Daily Express. Strong support for the Aliens Bill, a bill for the restriction of alien immigration, drafted by the legal authority for the Express, finds many friends in the lobby, writes our parliamentary representative. Sir Howard Vincent spoke warmly in its favour. This is to keep out immigration. I would imagine at this point it would be Jewish immigration. He points out, this is Howard Vincent points out the huge increase, great increase of late, of immigration of destitute aliens into the East End of London, coupled with the considerable numbers of such aliens who become a charge on the criminal law of this country, constituting a grave national danger, seriously affecting the employment, the welfare and housing of the working classes. There we are. That's one story. That's the lead story of the Daily Express. Below that's wonderful. Second story. I'm going to pick a few out from the front page just because I like to. My show, my rules, dear listeners. A fur-clad lady is sent to jail. A rather distinguished-looking couple, both obviously of foreign extraction, says the Express. The lady, very comely, Mrs., and dressed in rich furs, were walking arm in arm in Bethnal Green one night when they were stopped by Detective Inspector Duval and Detective Sergeants Wensley and Lee. The lady was indignant. She said her name was Jane Lewis and that she was a governess, whilst her companion said his name was, here we go, Joslovich. I think, as I say, it's foreign extraction. And that she was a governess. Here we are. His name is Joslovich, and he was a diamond merchant and a buyer of jewellery. They were carrying some parcels which the officers opened. They found 21 diamond rings, 16 other rings, 7 gold watches, 54 gold Alberts. I don't know what that must be, a brooch, a diamond and a pearl pendant, numerous diamond brooches. It must be something else. Alberts, I don't know what that is. Earrings and other such miscellaneous articles, and silk handkerchiefs and mufflers. A nice little tickle there, I'd say. The lady is not, in fact, Jane Lewis, it seems, according to the report. It turns out to be Ilma Konofsky, a notorious travelling shoplifter, dear listeners, who'd already served 2 terms of imprisonment in England and 3 years in Brussels, Belgium, from which country she was expelled. Some of the goods were identified as having been stolen from Messrs. Turner's Drapery in New Street, Birmingham. We're back to Birmingham again. And from other firms in this country. Jeslovich was declared by the woman to be quite innocent. So he's innocent. She's the thief. He was living with her, it turned out, at the County of London Sessions. Both were found guilty. She was sent to jail for 18 months. He was released. There we are, dear listeners. I think that's enough for our review, our retrospective of Edwardian London, including Mill's fine victory 4-1 over Preston North End in the FA Cup 1903. I'll keep my fingers crossed and hope for a similar result tomorrow, dear listeners. Until the next edition, which will follow tomorrow's match, do tune in to Achtung Millwall. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. All the best.
Achtung Millwall.
Who do you want to watch?
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.